Hey everybody, this is part two of a two-part series that we did with Outbreaker. So the interview went a little bit longer than what we typically like to share as one episode. And so we thought we'd break it into two because the first part of the episode, we really talk about the technology behind the company and the backstory, how they got started and how they came across this technology and have developed it into a company. And so if you haven't watched that episode, I encourage you to go back to our archives over at amplemedia.com/amplify to watch that episode. In this episode, we're going to be talking about marketing. And so what are they doing in terms of marketing? I give them some advice on what they should maybe be targeting or how they should go about targeting some of their customers. I recommend account-based marketing. And then I also talk a bit about how to leverage press when you don't really know who your target audience actually is. And so in their case, they know some very specific companies that they'd want to reach out to because their technology can be used in the manufacturing of these other products, but they don't necessarily know all of the different types of companies that it would apply to. And so instead of trying to cold call everybody, I was recommending that they deploy a bit of a PR strategy and really leverage press and press releases to get the word out to a much broader audience, which then hopefully will drive some inbound traffic into their business. And then they can start those conversations or start doing some more targeted marketing to those people. So check out this episode after you've watched the first one, preferably. But either way, I think you're going to get a lot out of it, and I hope you enjoy it. So now, in terms of marketing, then as you're getting ready, you've got a little bit of a runway before you're going to really be hitting the market hard, which is advantageous because now you have some opportunity to build that market. Start marketing your products, building a little bit of demand or awareness as to what the solution is. What are you guys doing on that front? Do you have any challenges in front of you then from a marketing standpoint that you'd want to discuss?
Yeah, so for us, we've been able to take advantage of some really good media exposure. Of course, with this pilot, most recently,
Yeah.
got some attention. We have in the past been featured in various articles or television news. But we're now going to be reaching that point where we need to start generating our own marketing campaigns, our own PR strategy. So for us, it's focused on well, how do you make the public, or in our case potential partners, aware of this technology, aware that this market exists, it's new, and it's going to grow really fast. So really for us, it's like, what are different, techniques, strategies, processes we can implement to help get, a brand new technology out there and start generating awareness behind the product in the market.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned partnerships, and I think that's probably extremely wise for you guys with this new technology. Is you don't want to necessarily be in the space of trying to manufacture all the different potential touch surfaces that the public is going to come in contact with and selling those. It's probably better for you to be either licensing the technology to existing manufacturers or collaborating, building those partnerships with them so that they can integrate the technology into the surfaces that they're already building and already selling to municipalities and institutions and every other a company or product that has that need for some sort of microbial action on a surface, right? So if that's the angle that you want to go in terms of just building more partnerships, I think what it really comes down to is first trying to identify who those potential partners are. So who occupies that space in the purchasing cycle right now with the institutions, with these potential big buyers of surfaces, essentially. And so once you've identified who those companies are, I think then that you could take a what we call is an account-based marketing approach. And in that sense, what you would be doing is you'd be reaching out to multiple people within that company. And so sometimes you don't know who the right person is that you would need to be talking to. Maybe it is in their own R&D arm of the business, or maybe it's more on the product manufacturing side, or maybe it's the executive who's leading the charge on their sales efforts and their product development and so on. So it's you don't really necessarily know, and it could be different people in different types of organizations. And so when you don't know who that position is or who that person is, you want to make sure the organization itself is aware of you, aware of the technology, aware of what you guys can provide. And so one of the strategies that is relatively inexpensive to deploy is using LinkedIn actually as that account-based marketing platform. And so what you would do there is you would identify, most likely in this case, a C-suite of people within those larger companies, and then you can target articles and white papers and basically your LinkedIn posts to show up in those people's news feeds. And so that when they're over on LinkedIn interacting with some of the content there, they're going to see some of those articles. And the key there is have, a really great visual in that, whether it's a static one or it could be a video as well. And then making sure that your headline really speaks to, something that's going to grab that person's attention and make them, read that article essentially. Now, what I would recommend that you do is from any of those articles that you'd be posting and promoting into LinkedIn in this case, to that target audience, is to have some place where they can click on that article over to learn more about the technology or to read the full white paper, to watch the video on the use case as an example. So maybe you'll have a good case study video done up after this ETS experiment that you guys are doing. And so that will walk through how, what the results were and how it was used and why it's working so well and so on. So that information, which that person is reading an article about, they're clicking through, they're landing over on your website then, and they watch that video or they read the full case study. And at that point, then you can start to track them. So you can put a cookie into their browser. You can follow them around the internet. Then you can position inexpensive brand ads in front of them, depending on where they go on the internet or back to LinkedIn. And if you can get them to leave their email address and self-identify who they are, even better, because then instead of using ads to follow them around later on, what now you can do is start to sprinkle that information to them in their inbox. And so, those typical white papers and case studies, sometimes people will exchange their contact information to access those, to read the full article or the full report. Or it might be something where you guys are putting on some webinars, or you have an automatic presentation demonstration of this that, they just drop in their email address and then they can attend that webinar where you guys are talking about the technology. You have your researcher, you have the people from the University of Alberta there talking about it, because they're taking it to a whole nother level of detail and, technical speak than what your typical marketing material would have, but what your audience maybe is going to need in order to understand how they might be able to integrate it into their surfaces or whatever they're manufacturing. So account-based would be, I think, a pretty important one for you once you've identified some of those companies that might be potential buyers or potential collaborators. One thing that I also think that might work really well for you is what you're doing with the city of Edmonton there. That's just naturally going to create the potential for the city to start speccing your technology, right? So you're doing a trial with them, you prove the efficacy of it, and that's going to have some awareness just internally within their purchasing department, and which is going to then trickle into potentially them asking their suppliers to, or insisting that their suppliers start to look at ways to incorporate this technology in, or to be adding it into the specs when they're purchasing the next round of touch services for the LRT or whatever the application might be in this case.
Yeah.
So I think trying to go that route where you're trying to get people to spec it might be a really good avenue too. And so that might be almost like it'll be potentially a smaller group of
Mhm.
people where you can really target into those municipalities or into, in the case of, building management companies and so on, you can
Mhm.
talk to those people to get it spec'd into the requirements when they're building new or renovating existing buildings.
Yeah, yeah, and those are, great ideas for us. And because this type of product does have so many different application, uses. Yeah, it could be hard first identifying, and then of course, yeah, how do you get the attention of the person on the other side?
Yeah.
LinkedIn, a great resource. Actually, generating some of that content that is going to be more interactive, shareable. To drive interest versus just always pushing it out, right? All of a sudden you have somebody that's like, oh, yeah, I want to read more about that. I want to investigate it. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, like even identifying, yeah, the potential partner side, like you say, on the spec side, it's like, hey, well, that's, a very different targeted kind of person that you're going to try to market to than the end user, right? Like then the transit rider. So very different approaches than might typically be seen.
Yeah, and there's going to be a whole pile of companies that are not those great big ones that you know of or that you can identify. And so I think in a previous conversation you and I had before the show here, you were talking about there's a lot of companies that I just don't necessarily know who they are. I
Mhm.
don't know who might be a potential customer for our product, and so that's where those PR plans really come into place. So really leveraging the press that you're already getting and any of the research that you have, the data that's coming out of this trial. I heard about you guys through, major media, through our local newspaper. And so that article informed me, which if I happen to be somebody who was working in a business that could utilize this in the products that we are developing or the things that we're supplying to our customer base, then that would also, you've reached me then. And so when you don't really know who to reach, oftentimes that broader messaging or
Mhm.
broader reach that you can get out of traditional media is a really, really good thing to have. So I would encourage you to think through anytime that you are having an opportunity to showcase some results, releasing the research that's happening right now with COVID. When that happens, make sure that you have a really great story that you can hand over to or push out to the media outlet so that you can get some press on it, because that's so timely. And I think that the press is going to really eat that up, because they're looking right now for the bright spots on the horizon so we can come out of this pandemic. And so they're going to be latching on to any potentially good news story. And if your research is showing that it does really help reduce the spread of COVID, well, they're just all going to jump all over that. And so I would have that story, the main story of the release of it, and pushing that as a press release. But then I would have a strategy in place where any of the outlets that are picking up on that story, that you then have a follow-up sequence of additional stories, additional research that you can continue to sprinkle out to them so that they can continue to be talking about it over the next few months, right? And so that you have more of this amplification, more of this repetition, more potential exposure. And then when you get those opportunities, is then trying to amplify that. So when you do get global TV to come down and do an interview, take that interview and be posting that in the social, putting that on your website, leveraging that in your sales and marketing efforts as you're trying to get in front of these other companies, because it's making you look like a legitimate real deal then, right? And so
Mhm.
that could be the content that you're promoting to these people who are you've identified as being account-based contacts or targets that you want to be reaching in LinkedIn, and you're leveraging that content in those posts or farther down the funnel, depending on the type of content. and sorry, when I say funnel, I mean you have certain types of content that you want to use at the top of your marketing funnel, your sales funnel, that generate the awareness and interest. And then you want other types of content that will help nurture them into a potential customer or a potential meeting, right? And so this kind of information that's down in the middle part of the funnel is designed to give them more in-depth information than what you're giving them at the top. So it's where they're at that analysis stage and consideration stage. That type of content is usually a little richer, a little deeper, a little more technical maybe, and very different than what you would be using at the top to grab their attention. And so just making sure you're sequencing that properly and not just going from, hey, here's our article, from the journal, and yeah, you guys should buy this now, right? You don't go for the close right away. You have to nurture them, let them understand that you guys are a real deal. You've got the IPs, you've got the technology, you've got the research, you've got the evidence that this is going to work. You've got the case studies. You have some testimonials from the city of Edmonton once this trial is done. So talking about it, so it just really makes them trust you, and they've been following along a little bit. You've been sprinkling out information to them, and now they know you, and there's a bit of a relationship there that's been developed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a great plan, like a great strategy we can really implement for it, because even conversations we have kind of ongoing right now with different interested parties, on the smaller level, some of them on the really big level, anytime they've seen that news story or they've come across us and been able to latch on to that story, the conversation it's already advanced
Yes.
to a much greater level than if I'm sending a cold email to somebody or trying to message somebody on LinkedIn or something.
Exactly.
And even just at our stage, huge difference in those two interactions.
Yeah, it almost gives you legitimacy, right? Because
Yeah.
if it was newsworthy enough, if the press covered you, well, then it must be a legit story. You guys must be a legit company, and so on. So that really helps. The other thing that I would really focus on, and I think that there'd be just tremendous value in this, is doing some research on any upcoming conferences, any upcoming, like it's not going to be trade shows really because of face-to-face. So it's really just about the virtual conferences that are going to be happening over the next number of months around COVID and prevention and the spread. And there's going to be, some higher level technical scientific kind of conferences and gatherings that are going to be happening virtually, but there's going to be other ones that are going to be a little bit more commercial. And so any way that you can get onto the stage, and nowadays it's going to be the virtual stage,
Sure.
is going to really, again, help amplify the awareness as to what you guys do and what the potential is. And you just never know whose hands that's going to fall into, right? Eventually at some point where somebody mentions you to somebody else, and all of a sudden there's an interest and with the right person for that partnership. And so the key thing when you're doing those is, again, having a way to identify the people in that virtual audience who might be interested. And so giving them a place when you're, like, if I'm talking to, an audience of 100 people right now, and I wanted to get them to my website so that I could have a chance at getting their contact information so I can do my follow-up with them. What I want to do is I want to give them a reason to go there. And that reason could be, you present your data, you present the research, and then you say, and for the full case study, navigate over to this website URL, and boom, they're now over on your website. You've got an email collector there. You have the potential to cookie them and so on. So you're going to get some of those people who are just passively listening to now actually be actively turned into a lead, essentially. And that's going to be really key to just making sure you think through every speaking opportunity needs to be a lead generation opportunity. And so just speaking is great, but it's not necessarily going to allow you to harvest the leads out of that virtual room, as well as if you have a thought out strategy as to how you're going to do that. One of my favorite things to do, because it reduces the friction, is in this case, I would love a case study. If you guys have a case study or a white paper or a research paper or something, which I presume you probably have or would be able to develop fairly easily, is to have people text an easy code to a certain number. So text case study to, 555-444. And boom, what happens then is it creates then a, that when that text comes in, the bot basically texts them back and says, thanks for your interest in the case study. Can you give us your email address so that we can email you the link to the case study? And so now you have their email address. Now you have a means of reaching out to them. You can ask them for their phone number as well. You can ask them for a bunch of different preliminary things or required things before they actually have that access. But the bot is doing that on your behalf while you're still speaking from the stage, essentially. So
Right.
those are really, really powerful for turning those opportunities into lead generation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one thing to just get up there and talk about your company, your technology. Another thing to take advantage of it on that level. And yeah, these virtual conferences that we've all been attending over the last year, just an opportunity for everybody, kind of even in the startup space, right? Like it's a lot easier, a lot less barriers to attending some of these, really big conferences even, and getting a presence because it is virtual.
Yep.
And we over our time have learned firsthand, just sometimes it is just having your name mentioned, listed on all these different, you've attended this conference, if you're a panelist, you've presented, and all of a sudden just, Googling, even if I might not have heard of you, I Google you, oh, wow, all of a sudden the first 3 pages are full of, relatively recent, credibility worthy appearances, events, listings. And
Yep.
again, that all helps build that image of your company to those potential partners or customers.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the other benefits too of a great PR strategy is you're usually getting some links back from some very reputable, media institutions, which has tremendous SEO link power, and so then that will allow you to really benefit from having, scoring higher up in those search terms that might be relevant to what you guys are trying to score for. So there's a lot of different benefits that can come out of those opportunities that present themselves from a PR strategy standpoint, and that and the conference speaking,
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
kind of go hand in hand. So the more press you're going to get, the more you can reference that when you're pitching yourself as a presenter to some of these conferences. It just helps showing that you guys are in the news, right? And that becomes an indicator of relevancy to those conference organizers. And so, and again, builds a little bit more trust as well. So it's good a good combo, 1-2 punch kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
know a company in our position, of course, even though we might not be selling now, I'm sure you'd scream at me if I said, well, there's no need to start implementing a marketing strategy until I'm ready to sell. So these are all important things we got to start implementing, today. And because just, it's, one of my, smaller blind spots is, putting a focus on marketing. I know a lot of other, founders in these similar positions, right? You're focused on your technology, you're focused on other areas. So you got to start dedicating time to it to actually build something.
Bang on. And that's where you have kind of a little bit in a way, the luxury of time in some sense, because you can't really be doing it right now because you're waiting for the regulatory part, which is, I understand, also a bit of a pain in the ass for you right now as you're trying to wait for that and get that through the hurdles. But at the same time, then it's like, okay, yeah, you have time now to build that momentum, to build
Right.
those strategies so that you have
Right.
things in place where you can just really hit the ground running in the fall as soon as those regulations do get passed. You get through those regulatory hurdles and you're ready to market. Now, and one of the bigger challenges I think that you're going to have, and I think you mentioned this either earlier in the conversation that we've had today or earlier in our conversation that happened before we started recording, was just the vast potential opportunity out there. There is so many potential customers of this product, and where do you focus?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that you will have to, it'll be probably a bit of a struggle for you, and you're going to find some opportunity where there is some movement or some interest in a particular sector. So maybe it's municipalities as an example, or maybe it's school boards that then all of a sudden you're starting to get a little interest, and that's a pretty good indicator that if somebody is interested, that the other people within that same industry might be interested as well. And so I would just go hard into the ones where you're getting people really wanting to listen, or who are reaching out to you after seeing the news articles and so on. So I would focus in those areas first. Don't dilute yourself too much, because that's one of the risks that every business has, is you're trying to find your market, as you start to try to sell to everybody. And then your messaging isn't quite as clear or concise or compelling for each individual market that you're, or type of industry or type of customer. So the more relevant you can make your communications, the more applicable it is to that person's pain point, right? That company's pain point, what that solution that you're trying to provide. If you can narrow that down, you have a much better chance of it having resonance with that audience when they're seeing the marketing material, when they're reading the articles, when they're reading through the case study or whatever. That's going to have much more value to them than if it's more of a generic one, or if it's a case study, as an example, that kind of applies. I can kind of get it, that it would work for me as well, but it's not speaking specifically to me. It's easier for me to gloss over that, or push that aside, or not open that email, or open that link, or whatever. So try to narrow in the early days as much as you can, and use the initial feedback you're getting, where you're finding some people, you're piquing people's interests. When you find those ones, just go a little deeper, see if that's the case for other people within that same sector, industry, segment. And then if it is, then just go hard into that. You can always peg off another one later on, once you've got some revenues coming in from these ones.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And as you mentioned, like we kind of talked about, one of the coolest opportunities is so many different uses. Also, one of the biggest challenges, because you do need to focus. Every time we're kind of featured, my inbox fills up with, oh, can this be applied here? Can this be applied on this? I want one of these. And it's everything, it's a handle, it's a button on the elevator, it's a cell phone case. It's like, okay, love it. Absolutely agree. One day, let's tackle it all. But definitely need to narrow it down and focus first.
Yeah, when you held up that yellow block there, that was the first thing that I thought of, was that, man, that would work great for a cell phone case. They talk about how the cell phones are some of the dirtiest things out there, right? So
exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, Matt. And I think the technology is just so cool, because it's so simple. It's just one of these things where it's like, how come nobody's done this already? It's one of those moments, right? And you just know that you've got a great potential home run there when you can have that kind of a response, where it's just that aha moment. So I can understand why you guys got excited and got in, a partnership there with Doug the Inventor, and I think that what you have going right now with these trials and the research you're doing with COVID and the timing with COVID, it could potentially be just the perfect storm for you guys to really launch an incredible business and build those partnerships. So I foresee great things anyway. This looks really good.
Well, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. This has been great.
Now, if somebody did want to reach out to you so that they could put in their request for the cell phone case or some other crazy use case, how would you want them to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can visit our website, www.outbreaker.ca. Lots of ways to get a hold of us there. Just my email's there. You can also fill out a contact form. We're also on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. All that kind of linked on our website.
Awesome. So thank you very much again. And for everybody who's listening, it is such a treat to talk to businesses that have started, who found an opportunity, who are innovating in this time, in this space that we find ourselves in right now. And so if you know of another company that would be great to be featured on another episode of Amplify Your Business, please send them my direction. I would love to talk to them and see if we can make an episode out of it. And for those who are interested in checking out past episodes, we have an archive over at amplimedia.com/amplify. And you can see all of our past episodes as well as our future ones will be there as well. So thanks again, Matt. Really appreciate it. And everybody out there, stay safe and take care.